On a Sphere's Edge. Written by Keith Mosher. Narrated by Keith Mosher. Chapter 6. True Colors. Alexandria thought over Zeal's proposal. He offered more than she hoped he would. His third reason created mixed feelings in her. His curiosity unsettled her, but she was beginning to like Zeal, though she was not sure she liked being the kind of woman that Zeal would find appealing. His second reason for helping her was straightforward. She knew from the start that she would have to pay him. Zeal's first reason was the most understandable of all. Whatever his current position, he would want to manage it. He may have become implicated in her situation, and she was sure that it had not been in his plans to do so. "Okay, Zeal, I can't see a reason to refuse. It solves both our problems." She stood up as a sign of acceptance. "So how do we start?"
"First, we need working capital. Give me your credit codes."
Zeal activated a different console.
"Punch them up and tap your cell here."
Alex moved toward him. "I do owe it to you." She stroked her cell and tapped it where he indicated. Zeal squared himself up in front of the console and began dragging and pushing.
"I'm going to transfer all of your available credits into the Library and Tea Club. The fleet, and thus the affiliate, suspects you've been there, so it will seem credible. Eliza will have no difficulty defending herself if they ask her about your credits. From there, I'll transfer the credits to a corporation that I know of. Next, a distribution agency, and from there they will enter my accounts in the form of a payroll payout. That will completely sever any direct ties between you and me, financially speaking."
He glanced at her and winked. He stroked the console for a minute or so.
"There, the sequence is started. It'll take a few days for the funds to hit my accounts. Until then, I can front you."
Zeal shut down the console, stood up, and walked over to a closet. From it he took a large briefcase. He opened it. Inside of it, on a side panel, was a small screen. He activated it and then began making some adjustments.
"This case is heavily shielded and actively masked. It should block the item's EM transmissions, or at least it will greatly reduce them. Put the item in here."
Alexandria looked suspiciously at him. Zeal shrugged and then tapped the panel again.
"All right, here's the lock code reset. Change it to your print."
Alexandria studied the panel, set it to reset, pulled out her cell, tapped at it a few times, and then touched it to the panel, and then touched her left thumb to the panel. She then closed the briefcase and tested it, trying to open it with different cell settings and different fingers of her hand. When she felt satisfied that the lock was properly set, she opened the briefcase, pulled the sphere case out of her bag, and placed it inside the larger briefcase and locked it up. Zeal went back to his console and waved and tapped and studied the screens.
"As long as you do not brush up against a scanner or probe, you should be okay. I've deactivated the EM shielding around the house. Now all we need to do is get to my spaceport."
Zeal pushed back his big chair and started swiveling again. Alexandria glanced around the room and then studied Zeal. "What's the problem? Where's your port?" Considering the wealth of the house, she half expected it to be in the backyard. Zeal got up and began to walk around in a distracted circle.
"It's just the other side of Moon's Landing, but I need to make a call first."
He tapped his cell link and put his hand out in front of him, palm up. The link projected a digit pad on his fingers and a hot list on his palm. He touched his palm, scrolled the hot list, and then tapped his palm on a select number. After a moment, the image of a grimy young man appeared on his palm.
"Moon's Landing Spaceport Garage, can I help you?"
"Yes, this is Zeal Katz. Is my ship ready?"
"Let me check."
The young man looked to the side, obviously checking another screen, and then came back.
"Almost, sir. They're working on some last parts, and then they will button her up."
Zeal asked,
"How long?"
The young man grimaced.
"I'm not really sure. 4 or 5 hours from what the report is showing."
Zeal scrubbed his chin.
Is there any chance it can be rushed? I need to make a trip. Tell Brad I would really appreciate it. I'll be glad to pay rush charges.
The young man said.
I'll tell the boss and see what we can do.
Zeal said.
Thanks. And once it's done, please go ahead and prep it. I'm heading your way shortly.
The young man got a bit flustered.
Okay, but Mr. Katz, I don't know if we can get it done that quickly. Maybe you should wait and we'll call you.
Zeal replied.
I really can't wait. Do the best you can. I'll be there in an hour or so. Thanks.
With that, he closed his palm, disconnecting the link. He flopped down in his chair. He seemed both frustrated and concerned. He almost frantically swiveled and rocked, and then slapped the arm of his chair as if he had made a determination and got up and said,
There's nothing to it but to do it.
He eyed Alexandria for a moment and then raised his hand, his trusty pointer finger extended in a signal for her to wait. He turned to the closet again, this time removing his large overcoat and fedora.
Here, put these on. Stuff your hair under the hat.
She did as he told her. He looked her up and down.
Well, it's a bit floppy, but it'll do.
Zeal returned to the closet yet again. He took a jacket from a hanger and flung it over another briefcase, which he then picked up along with a small suitcase. He closed the closet and turned to see Alexandria looking curiously at his packed bags. He shrugged.
I like to be prepared. And considering that, before we go it would be wise to make a pit stop.
She gave him another curious look, not fully understanding what he meant. He walked down a hallway saying,
I'll be just a minute.
Alexandria got his meaning and stood patiently, looking around Zeal's well-equipped home. After a few minutes, Zeal returned, saying, I don't know about you and Pleiades' pleasures, but Sudahal doesn't stay in me very long. She smiled. Perhaps you're right. I'll be right back. And she also went into Zeal's little private room. As soon as she closed the door, Zeal put his open palm out in front of him again. The digit style and hot list appeared on his palm. He tapped a spot that read, Sell. A menu appeared on his palm, and he tapped at a function that called up the readings taken when he tapped the sphere in the false air ducts. A wireframe facsimile of the sphere appeared on his palm, along with a host of indicators, labels, and meter readings. The small size of the image, along with the uneven nature of the projection on his palm, did not allow him to get a lot of details from the information. He tapped on a meter reading here, then another, pushing and turning and examining the tiny image with the pointer finger of his other hand. As soon as he heard the bathroom door start to open, he closed his fist, shutting off his cell and cell link. As Alexandria approached him, she smiled. At least we thought of it before we left. Zeal grabbed his bags. Alexandria slung her bag over her shoulder and picked up the sphere-laden briefcase. Zeal led her down a hallway, at the end of which was a door that led into a garage. In it, Zeal kept an excellent late-model K-Knight Freeling Aero Auto. Alexandria looked the vehicle over and gave her approval. Nice machine. Zeal opened the driver's side door. I like it. He pressed a button, and a hatch popped open in the rear of the vehicle. He tossed in his bags and then climbed into the driver's seat. Alexandria looked at the trunk. She felt uneasy about putting the briefcase in it, once again tormented between hiding it and keeping it. She put her bag in the trunk, closed it, and then climbed in on the passenger's side, keeping the briefcase with her. Zeal noted how she kept her items so close to her. He started up the engine, the garage door opened, and they were off. As they drove down the back streets of 20s, Zeal explained,
Just sit sort of low. If we're stopped by the police, just keep quiet. I think we're safe, but you never know.
Alexandria turned to him with an expression of frustration. I do believe I understand what's going on, Zeal. I know I haven't shown you my better side so far, but I have been out of my element. Give me a little credit. Zeal raised a hand from the controls.
No, I get your point. Actually, you've done well considering the position you were in. I know it isn't easy for you deciding to disobey orders. You've had to accept some big changes in your life.
Zeal's expression of understanding calmed her at first, but then dug at her. What makes you think I decided to disobey orders? Zeal calmly said, You virtually said as much. Oh, not in so many words, but I could read between the lines. Alex had always thought of Zeal as a thief, a person concerned with things. His ability to read people, to connect and be helpful, and show compassion made her think of the hurt little child again. She became keenly aware that Zeal may enjoy showing off his toys, but he wasn't really concerned with them as much as he was focused on how they connected him to others. With each passing moment, he became less thief and more personal. As they drove down the back streets, they passed other vehicles or some folk walking, even a police vehicle. She felt exposed. Wouldn't it be much quicker to take to the air about now? Zeal glanced upward and grimaced. He looked unsure, even uncomfortable with the idea. Finally, he nodded.
Yes, but also a bit risky. The airspace on 3P is very tightly controlled. They don't want 3Ps flying over attractions, spoiling things for guests. That's why there are so few airspace traffic lanes. Plus, the police arrows are spreading their search radius. They can move up on us so much quicker up there. We're better off on the road. It's easier to keep a safe distance.
Something about his manner and voice told Alexandria that the local police was not the only reason he wanted to stay on the road. Zeal continued,
It is going to take almost an hour by road. Most of it will be open stretches. Just relax. Here.
He punched a spot on the vehicle's console, and a heads-up display appeared on Alexandria's side of the windshield.
Watch a movie, a vid or something.
She reached out to the image and flipped through the menu, eventually selecting a local news channel. The news announcer was babbling on about some disagreement between various party heads over some minor action taken by the affiliate council. The typical picking of a nit to discredit one side or the other over a mistake that could not have been planned, but with sufficient saber-rattling could possibly sway people's opinions. The announcer concluded the story and then said, And to repeat this breaking news, there was another terrorist bombing almost 2 hours ago. The intergalactic terrorist group, Spirits of the Sphere, has publicly announced their responsibility in the bombing at 3P's Globes Gallery, saying that commercialism is suppressing the true order of the sphere. Authorities have not yet confirmed that Spirits of the Sphere is responsible, and have not yet ruled out other organizations or even the possibility that the bombing was caused by an individual or individuals in a copycat fashion. Reports are still coming in, but there is an estimated 6 dead and 32 wounded. The announcer went on to detail the situation, while images taken from security cams and cops' eyes showed the carnage. Alexandria's mind drifted. In a briefcase beside her sat the Sphere of Legends, the very sphere that cultists like Spirits of the Sphere paid homage to. Their worship was as she had imagined in her recent dream, yet it was exactly what she did not want for the galaxy. She wrestled with herself. Must violence always precede order? Does entropy have to lead to chaos? Could she help to keep peace, or would the violence continue no matter what she might do? If she successfully kept the sphere from her rival, kept it out of the hands of military minds, she might stop some killing and oppression, and yet the violence and hatred would go on. The cultists were on the side the sphere represented, yet they were as militant as the military. She wondered at her purpose. Zeal grunted, shaking her from her thoughts. What? She asked. Zeal shook his head. Damn sphereheads. But I guess it will always be that way. Alexandria was taken aback by his statement. It stung, though she fought to conceal it. So you think there isn't any way to stop that sort of thing? Zeal glanced at her.
It has been going on since before language. No reason to think it will ever stop. Why even watch that stuff? All it can do is make you pissed off with the world and the the masses that live in it.
She agreed, grudgingly. I guess you're right. She reached up and flipped the display off. Zeal drove on for the better part of an hour, neither of them saying anything. He puzzled over Alex's item and wondered about his growing feelings for her. He rarely fell in love. The times he had ended in disaster. Few women could understand his old profession, and those that could were often shady themselves and not very stable. Perhaps that was one of the reasons he found Alexandria attractive. She was quick, smart, agile, and willing to take a few risks, yet she was stable. She was a type of woman he never had the opportunity to be serious with the exception of Eliza. However, Eliza was just a security blanket for Zeal, and he was one for her. Commitment to them was simply accepting that they could have fun whenever they happened to be in the same place at the same time. Neither of them were people that either would run home to. However, Novastra was a cop deep down inside, and probably always would be, though he wondered if he was now any different. Alex considered Zeal as they rode down the night streets. He had been helpful, straightforward, and even considerate and kind. These were qualities most people considered to be moral. As an officer, her concept of criminals was that they were corrupt to the core. But then she was usually assigned to the most wanted lists. The criminals that were hard to catch had long lists of crimes, and most of them serious and violent in nature. Zeal had been hard to apprehend, and his list had been long, but he was not violent in the least. Perhaps some criminals are not evil, and much like herself are ordinary people that had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She speculated that it would not take too many unfortunate events to make a young boy with a missing dad turn into a troubled young boy, and then a troublesome young boy, and finally a criminal of sorts. With this understanding and the acceptance of Zeal's good qualities, her feelings for him took a step forward, and that she felt was beneficial. They would be working together for a while, and if they liked each other, the time would be more pleasant and useful. Still, she wondered what work Zeal was currently involved in. What could make him so wealthy and also require a reputation that needed protecting? His earlier comments did not verify or deny his involvement in criminal activities. There were secrets about him that kept Alex from being able to wrap her complete trust around him. Without a single incident on the road, they pulled into one of 3P's many spaceports. Zeal drove around the main hangar and parked the Arrow. "Just wait here. It shouldn't take long." Alexandria was both anxious and excited. "I can't just sit here, Zeal. Look, I'm as much of a target sitting in the Arrow as I am standing up outside. At least if I'm on my feet, I can move." Zeal shrugged. "All right, come on." Alex got out, and they both walked toward the hangar. The 3P Moon's Landing spaceport is huge, with hundreds of parked craft of every description, from big commercial cargo vessels to small personal transports and Arrows. The main hangar is equally mammoth, but once inside, despite the extra size, it is like any hangar on any busy planet. The repair shop and garage are always busy. Work goes on around the clock. There were aero autos and skyhoppers, spacecraft, monorail and tube cars, and even a moon astronaut automaton, all in various stages of repair. The bodywork section was painting a monorail car. The mechanics had several different engines laid out in several areas, like a mechanical triage. It was noisy and musty and smelled of synth oils. A young man in his early 20s, wearing a pair of grimy red coveralls, the same young man that Zeal had talked to earlier, walked over to them. "Can I help you?" Then, recognizing Zeal, "Oh, Mr. Katz, let me pull up your work order. That's Katz with a C, right?" In frustration, Zeal replied, "No."
K-A-T-Z.
Alex looked at him. Is that some kind of signal? With an appropriate amount of giggle and bounce, she mimicked Unetta. Is that cats with a C?
Zeal glared at her. No, but I get it all the time, and I don't understand why either.
The young man moved to a desk area and punched up some information on a console. Sorry, Mr. Katz, no can do. She's not finished yet.
Zeal was frustrated and a bit nervous. What? Can't you just close the hatches and finish it up? I don't need a paint job, not right now anyway.
Sorry, you'll have to talk to the boss, and she's off right now.
Zeal asked, Is she here?
The young man hedged. Well, yeah, I mean, she's upstairs, but she isn't working now. Zeal became a bit firm.
Well, call her. Tell her it's Mr. Katz. She'll come.
Sorry, Mr. Katz, I can't do that. She made it clear that she did not want to be bothered tonight. If I call her, well, I need this job, you know?
All right, never mind. I'll get her myself.
Zeal walked over to the side of the building where a set of rickety stairs led up to a loft that was suspended over an entire third of the hangar. The hangar was noisy with laser welding, pipe vendors, metal grinding, and the general clangor of a repair shop. Zeal raised his voice over the clamor as he looked up at the loft.
Hey, Evan! Evan Brad! It's Zeal Katz! Get your skinny bottom down here!
Zeal waited a moment or two, then looked around and spotted a large wrench. He picked it up and began banging on the railing. As he whacked, he continued trumpeting.
Evan! Evan! Evan Brad!
After a few moments of this racket, a window in the loft slid open, and a skinny, grubby face poked out.
What the hell is going on down there?
Zeal stopped banging.
Evan, it's Katz. Get down here.
Evan's voice was anything but soothing. Years of smoking, drinking, and probably inhaling various exhausts in the hangar had given her a deep, raspy throat.
Forget it, Katz. I'm off. Call me tomorrow.
She began to withdraw from the window. Zeal raised his arm and pointed his finger.
Hold it, Brad. Remember the other night in the library?
Yeah, what about it, Katz?
You wouldn't want me to tell Merrick what I know about it.
Evan paused.
All right. Give me a sec, will ya?
After a few moments, the door to the loft opened, and Evan emerged. She was very tall, more than 2 meters, her frame thin and bony. Her peculiar hairstyle, piled on top of her head almost like a hat, did not disguise her height as much as it enhanced it. She was wearing a white pullover short-sleeved shirt that was smeared and grimy, and a pair of pink stretch slacks that were as dirty as the shirt. Both the shirt and pants were form-fitting and left little of Evan's almost breastless anatomy to imagination. She wore white high-top sneakers that were untied and so smeared and covered with grease and scent oils that they looked brown. She carried a freshly poured beer in one hand and the stump of a cigar in the other as she marched down the squeaky stairs.
You've got a lot of nerve, Zeal. What the hell do you want?
I just want to pick up my ship.
Evan laughed at him. It sounded like a trash can being dragged over gravel.
You've got to be kidding me. We just got the engine back in that thing. It'll take at least 2 more hours to finish up after the mess you made of it. It'll be 3, maybe 4 hours before we can run simulations on it.
Alex had been standing by quietly, not wanting to draw attention to herself, but something Evan said piqued her curiosity. What do you mean, the mess he made of it? Zeal shot Alex a look, as if to remind her that she needed to keep quiet and out of sight. Evan laughed again as she stuffed the chewed-up piece of a cigar in her mouth.
I was trying to teach this mudhugger how to fly. Full-punched the re-entry shield at 3,000 meters and blew the mag sphere. Damn near killed us both in the process. Thank the sphere there was enough reserve power for the anti-grav cushion and inertial restraints.
She took a chug of beer and then ran her arm across her mouth.
We've had to drop the entire engine. Been digging for 2 days now, right to the core of the block.
Evan turned to Zeal and poked him with a long, bony finger.
You ought to just stick to the public trans and charters.
Zeal rubbed his face, not in frustration as much as an attempt to hide for the moment. Alex eyed Zeal up and down. Once again, she was seeing a part of him she had not expected. You mean he doesn't have a license? He can't fly? Evan giggled.
You didn't know, honey? Oh, this one here thinks he's the sphere's gift. Drives the hottest aero, has plenty of toys and credits, loves the ladies, but can't get himself up.
She took another big chug of beer. Alex snuggled up to Zeal and ran a finger up and down his arm in a false, loving fashion. Those damn mudhuggers. Don't you just hate 'em, the cowards? She laughed. Zeal buried his face in his hand again, feeling embarrassed. He slunk away from Alex.
All right, enough you two. Evan, I need a ship. Can you speed things up or rent me something?
Evan took a big drag on her cigar butt and then blew smoke right at Zeal.
Wrong again, Cats. I don't have anything for rent, nothing that flies anyway. So I guess you're out of luck for a half a day, eh?
Evan let out a guffaw that was almost as much cough as it was laugh.
Come on, Brad. You've got a huge team here. I'll pay rush charges. You know I'm good for them.
For the first time, Alex saw Zeal at a loss. Evan chided Zeal.
Cats, that's a really pretty, comfortable ship, but didn't I warn you about buying it? Of all the craft to buy, you had to get that Century. They're hard to work on, hard to get parts for, and not very reliable.
She paused to think for a moment. Then she yelled out across the hangar at a mechanic who was shoulders deep inside a huge luxury craft. The mechanic didn't hear her, so she picked up a rubber bushing that was nearby and threw it at the ship the guy was working on. It made a sufficient thud on the vessel, causing the mechanic to pull his head out. She waved him over to her. The two of them talked for a few minutes, the mechanic clearly protesting that what was being asked was going to be difficult. Finally, he turned from Evan and called several other mechanics off their jobs and began laying plans for finishing up the task at hand. Then Evan turned to Zeal.
Tell you what, we'll see how fast we can go, but you may be sitting here for several hours.
Alex cleared her throat. Excuse me, did you say Zeal's ship is a Century? Evan smiled.
Yep, can you imagine that? When it comes to electronics and programs, Zeal is the cat's meow. When it comes to hardware, he can't tell the difference between a coil and a spring. Put plush seats and a nice paint job on a bucket, and his eyes will light up.
Alex was appalled. A Century? What model? Evan leaned into Alex, and with a knowing grin replied,
An XB3.
Alex's jaw dropped. Are you kidding me? She took a step back and glared at Zeal. You're crazy. I'm not stepping in that thing. Forget it. We have to come up with some other way off this rock. Zeal was just shy of blushing.
Hey, what do I know? It looks damn good and it is really comfortable. When I went for a test ride in it, it felt great. I figured a larger ship meant it was a bit safer.
Evan was looking at the crew getting things put back together on the ship. She leaned into Alex.
I can tell you know your stuff. The Centuries do have a poor reputation, but it'll be all right. It'll get you where you're going.
Alex still protested. Poor reputation, hell. 80% of them were recalled. The only reason the other 20% weren't was because they had already blown up, were spaghettified, or are still trapped in some never-ending hyperhole. They're death traps. Zeal leaned forward, grabbed Alex by the coat sleeve, and pulled her to him. He spoke in a low voice that was almost buried by the cacophony of the shop.
Calm down. We don't have time to run around 3P on a ship deal, and you don't need to call attention to yourself.
He glanced around at the team of mechanics.
Evan is straight with me. If she says it'll get us where we are going, it will, and your trail will stop here. Understand?
Evan leaned toward Alex again.
Just so you know, Since we had to strip the thing all the way down to the mag sphere, I had the guys make several modifications, especially considering who would be flying it.
She gave Zeal the evil eye.
It isn't as fast as its original specs, but it's a good bit safer and in good shape. Well, it will be once the boys finish up.
Alex was furious, but she could not deny Zeal's points, and she had a good feeling about Evan. Some mechanics are focused on how many credits they can squeeze from the customer. Evan did not appear to be one of those. She seemed to be the type that enjoyed making things work properly. All right. She stabbed Zeal in the chest with her finger. But you are going to leave all the flying to me. He held up both of his hands in a sign of surrender.
Fine by me.
Alex then turned to Evan. So how long do you think, really? Evan stuffed her cigar back in her mouth and looked over the crew working on this ship.
An hour? Maybe less if we skip the simulations.
Alex began running down a list with Evan. The mag sphere casing?
Replaced.
Density wavefront emitters and field generators?
The emitters are fine, but we did need to replace the repulsors. Upgraded them to Atlas parts, which required modification in the power delivery systems, but that was a cinch.
Zeal put his hand on Alex's shoulder.
Stick to the game plan. Let her do her job so we can get out of here.
She leveled her eyes at Zeal as she brushed his hand free. Stay out of this, Cats. This is between us ladies. Evan grinned and pulled the cigar from her mouth.
Looks like you've got a handful, Cats.
She turned to Alex.
Since you'll be flying it, let me show you what we've done.
Evan led Alex to a console where she pulled up Zeal's work order and began going over the various modifications her crew had made. Zeal was lost around this sort of talk, so he paced about the shop. He walked past a console and something caught his eye. The schematic on the display looked vaguely familiar. He stared at it. It reminded him of some of the readings he had gotten from Alexandria's item. He reached out to move the image around, but a mechanic yelled at him. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Don't touch that. What do you want to do, electrocute me? Zeal slunk back.
Sorry.
Feeling more embarrassed than before, he stuffed his hands in his pockets and continued to wander aimlessly. He looked out of the huge hangar door and saw a 3P Fleet Police Arrow pull up next to his Arrow. 2 3P Fleet Police officers got out and began examining his vehicle. He walked over to Alex and Evan.
Excuse me, ladies.
Not wanting to raise any suspicions, he spoke casually and confidently to Alex.
I'm going to get my things out of the Arrow.
He tipped his head in the direction of the parking lot and winked at her.
You guys can get lost in all your technical stuff for a while.
Zeal left the hangar and headed toward the officers. Alex watched Zeal as he headed outside and then noticed his concerns. She looked at Evan and then looked at herself, dressed in a large overcoat and fedora. Still holding the briefcase with one hand, she put her free arm around Evan's elbow and began to lead her to the loft stairs. I wonder if you could do me a big favor. Zeal waved at the officers as he approached them. They were patrol officers, adorned with white helmets and body armor, equipped with sidearms and a small battery of paraphernalia.
Hi, can I help you?
Then he recognized one of them.
Oh, Sergeant Granner. I didn't know it was you in the dock.
He was relieved. Granner was one of the regular officers of the residential areas around 20's, Sexborough and Moon's Landing. He was a middle-aged man of average height with a strong physique. Zeal had encountered him a few times during nightly constitutionals. Sergeant Granner was always polite and never pried into Zeal's private affairs. It was obvious to Zeal that he was a seasoned officer, the type who knows when to enforce the law and when not to bother.
Good evening, Mr. Katz. Sorry to interrupt your evening. We saw you leaving the residential area a little while ago, and I figured you might have come here. Is your ship fixed up?
Granner shot his partner a knowing sidelong glance.
Well, no, it isn't. How did you know it needed work?
It isn't every day that a ship has an emergency anti-grav landing.
and the fire crews have to be called out because someone blows an entire engine. Things like that get around the office.
Zeal would have been totally embarrassed, except he never claimed to be a pilot, and on occasion even boasted that he wasn't. Still, it was a poke, and he felt it.
Hell, maybe I'll never get a pilot's ticket, but at least I'm trying.
Zeal elected to stick with idle chatter rather than pressing the officers to their point.
I'll give you credit for that, Mr. Katz. Oh, excuse me, this is Officer Talan. She just transferred to my section.
Officer Talan was a little taller than Granner and well built, both for a woman as well as an officer. It was impossible for Zeal not to notice her uniqueness. The left side of her face and the left half of her neck were cybernetic replacements. Because of the way she moved, Zeal thought her left shoulder and arm might also be prosthetics.
Hello, Officer Talan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Katz. Talan's voice was slightly synthetic. Zeal saw this as a chance to keep the officers off their agenda. Though it might embarrass the officer, Zeal did not want to be further embarrassed himself.
Excuse me, Officer Talan. I hope you don't mind my asking, but what happened?
He gestured toward the left side of his own face. Talan seemed indifferent. I don't mind. I'm used to it now. I got caught attempting to stop a terrorist bombing on Reina Eridani. I do have an acceptable covering, but I find the effect of keeping it exposed gives me an edge on the job. Zeal was impressed.
Damn. Reina has always been a tough place. I've only been there once, and I hope I never go there again.
He was truly amazed at how comfortable Talan was with her implants, and how well they mimicked natural movements. If not for their obvious construction and the minor imperfections of the synthetic voice, one would not notice. He imagined that with the artificial skin covering, no one would know by sight alone. Yes, Reina is tough, but after this, Talan gestured toward her own left side. I asked for a transfer. Since then, I've served on several pleasure planets. Lots of work, but not quite as risky. But enough about me, Mr. Katz. We need to ask you a few questions. Sergeant Granner broke in.
Yes, as I said, we saw you leaving the residential area. We are looking for a woman, 35, medium height, dark hair, answers to the name Alexandria Novastra. Some folk in 20s Town told us they saw you earlier this evening with a woman that matches her description. Is that correct?
As Granner said this, he held out a cell that displayed Alexandria's official fleet profile, including a rotating mug image.
Well, I was with a woman that matches the description, but it wasn't her.
Zeal read the profile to assure the officers that he was looking carefully.
So, a lieutenant commander. An officer gone bad?
No, MIA. Just looking out for one of our own. Is that woman with you now?
No, we went to my house for a little while, you know.
Zeal raised his eyebrows a couple of times.
But she left, I guess about 2 hours ago, and headed towards Sexborough.
I see. Are you getting ready to leave 3P?
Yes, on business. They're just finishing up my ship now. I'll be leaving as soon as they're done. In fact, I was just coming out here to get some things.
Zeal opened the aero and began collecting the bags, including Alexandria's bag. Sergeant Granner continued the questioning. I hope you aren't going to pilot it. Zeal smiled.
No, I've got a pilot.
He gestured toward the hangar. Would you mind if we went into the hangar to verify your statements?
No, not at all.
Zeal closed up the aero and led the officers back to the hangar, slowly. He hoped Alex had picked up on what was happening and that she was staying sharp. He was developing feelings for her. He had just put himself at risk, albeit a small one, in lying to the officers. When the three of them entered the hangar, the young night manager came over to them.
Mr. Katz, your ship is just about ready.
Zeal thanked him and set down his bags near the foot of the loft stairs. Sergeant Granner then turned to Zeal. I guess that verifies some of your statements, Mr. Katz. Meanwhile, Talan was examining a handheld scanner and visually surveying the hangar with her right eye closed, relying on an enhancement in her cybernetic left eye. Granner looked at Talan, and she officially stated, All on the floor accounted for. There are 2 in the loft. Talan held out the scanner for Granner to inspect. As she did, Zeal glanced at it as well. Granner studied the small screen.
Can you make out the sex of the two upstairs?
No, there's too much interference in here. I count 18 life forms on this scanner, and I see 16 down here. None of the women down here meet the description. The scanner does show the remaining 2 at a raised elevation, so it must be the loft, but I can't get any more detail than that. Sergeant Granner reached out a hand and pressed a key on Talan's scanner.
The loft or the roof, but we'll try the loft first.
The sergeant turned to the night manager.
Is Ms. Brad here tonight?
The young man was shaky and nervous.
Yes, sir, she's upstairs.
Talan holstered her scanner, and the 2 officers headed toward the steps to the loft when the manager added,
I wouldn't go up there. I mean, she said she didn't want to be bothered tonight.
The officers did not hesitate. Zeal followed the officers closely. When the 3 of them reached the landing at the top of the stairs, they found the loft's office door partly open. Sergeant Granner tapped on the door and pushed it wide as he said,
Fleet Police.
What they found surprised Zeal as much as it did the officers. Evan's office was as messy as her clothes, but the real shock was Evan herself. She was lounging on a sofa, fully clothed, her back against the arm furthest from the door. One leg was stretched out along the sofa, and the other was on the floor. Lying between her legs was an individual wearing a large overcoat and hat. From the point of view of Zeal and the police, all that could be seen was the person's back. Evan and this individual were in the middle of a deep, passionate kiss, and the person on Evan was fondling her right breast. When the police entered, Evan pulled away in surprise. Her lover buried his head between Evan's face and the sofa and dropped his hand from Evan's breast with an embarrassed gesture. Evan's lips were wet and shiny, and she was livid.
What the hell? You've got a lot of nerve barging in like that.
Both officers took a sheepish step backward as Sergeant Granner took charge.
Excuse us, Miss Brad. We needed to check something out. Please forgive the interruption.
Evan snorted at the officers and placed a hand on the neck of her lover. Granner turned to Talan.
1 female and 1 male, and I know the female. That's 18, correct?
Talan confirmed her sergeant's observation, completing all official requirements. Then Granner addressed everyone.
Excuse us, folks.
Looking at Zeal,
sorry for any delay we may have caused you. Hope you all enjoy your evening, and enjoy your trip, Mr. Katz.
The officers headed down the steps. Zeal followed them down the stairs, stopping at the bottom.
No problem, officers. Glad to help.
He watched them as they headed out of the hangar. When they were a short distance away, Zeal glanced up at the loft and thought for a moment. He walked over to the monitor he had noticed earlier and found the mechanic and asked,
Excuse me, that schematic you had up a little bit ago, could I see it?
The mechanic, a thick-set woman in a standard pair of red coveralls, got up from her work. Seeing the handsome Zeal standing there, she smiled.
Sure, honey. Just don't touch, okay?
Zeal assured her.
I promise. I'm just curious.
She called up the schematic, and she and Zeal entered into a casual conversation about it. Evan watched a security monitor while Alex stayed in position on top of her, just in case. When Evan saw the police arrow leave, she said,
They're gone.
Alex got up from her. As she did, Evan said,
I rather enjoyed that. It was fun.
She let out one of her coughing laughs as she picked up her beer and cigar. Alex went across the room and picked up her briefcase, and then turned to Evan. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Evan's hard, gruff nature suddenly softened. She turned and looked shyly down as she waved her hand at Alex.
It was nothing.
The 2 of them headed out of Evan's office to the loft landing. The mechanic was showing Zeal something in a small container. Zeal reached out to touch the container's contents, but the mechanic quickly grabbed his arm. Just then, Alex and Evan spotted Zeal talking to the lady mechanic. The mechanic took her hand from Zeal, touched her head, and sort of swooned. She and Zeal chuckled.
Evan said,
See? He can't leave the ladies alone for a minute.
Alex and Evan began down the loft stairs. As they did, Zeal and the mechanic continued to talk. The mechanic closed up the little box and placed a pair of thick gloves on the case and picked up the entire lot. She and Zeal had a few more words. She nodded her head and shot her eyes at the console and then headed toward the sentry and went inside. Zeal noticed Alex and Evan. As he headed toward them, he pulled out his cell and tapped the console with it and then met them at the foot of the stairs. Alex looked at Zeal.
Give Evan 100 credits, okay?
100 credits? Why?
That's the usual rate for 10 minutes, isn't it?
Alex giggled and winked at Evan, who also let out a chuckle.
Come on, Zeal. She helped me out. Just put it on my bill.
Evan winked at Alex.
Thanks, that would be a great way to make a living, eh?
She guffawed and coughed. Evan's crew began hauling Zeal's ship out onto the tarmac. Evan led Zeal to her main console, and he settled up his bill with her, including a transfer of 100 credits to Evan's private account. Zeal grabbed Alex's bag and handed it to her, and then picked up his briefcase, suitcase, and jacket as they thanked Evan for her help. They strode out of the hangar and started out across the tarmac toward the XB-3. Once they were well out of sight and sound of the hangar, Alex shuddered.
I hope there's some toiletries on board.
She made a retching, spitting sound and rubbed her hand over her lips as if to wipe away a foul taste. Zeal smiled at her.
So I take it you found it hard to kiss a woman. Hell, Kiss. You were feeling her up.
No, it isn't that. Most teenage girls experiment with their girlfriends anyway. I mean, I am hetero for the most part, but I don't mind kissing women. It's just that it was your friend, Evan. Can a person get any filthier? I wonder if I caught any diseases. And that cigar taste.
She shuddered and retched again. Despite her uncomfortable feelings about Evan's hygiene, she was feeling quite relaxed. Evan's modifications to the XB-3 were corrections she agreed with, helping her to feel more comfortable with the ship she was about to fly. Their little sneak by the police relieved her. She is, or used to be, a fleet officer, so she knew the up-front uniformed procedures. The fleet had made the required check on Zeal and cleared him for the moment. They might want to talk to him again, but it would be long after he was off 3P before it would occur to them. Zeal was proving to be an unmeasurable help with her dilemma, and soon she would be among the stars again. Zeal walked alongside Alex, caught up in his own thoughts about women and kissing and other things.
So how did you manage that little trick anyway?
I told her that I saw you talking to the two officers. She didn't find that surprising. I said that I had a little tryst with one of them, and that we had a fight. That's why I was with you, and why we were leaving 3P for a while.
Alex chuckled.
I won't go into what she told me about you. Anyway, I told her that I did not want to talk to them, and asked if she would help me. She's a woman. She understood. It was both our ideas, really.
Alex thought over the things she and Evan had discussed. Evan had not been surprised that the police had come looking for Zeal. She told Alex that Zeal often had dealings with the fleet and the affiliate. Evan saw herself as a straightforward business person and did most things properly. She had explained that while Zeal often managed his business in a roundabout fashion, all her business contacts with him had been completely legal. In the end, Evan had warned Alex.
Best watch yourself, honey. He seems like a nice guy, has lots of credits and nice toys, and like I say, he seems to be on the up and up. All the ladies love him. But there is something about Mr. Katz that no one can put a finger on. Just be careful.
The warning had not surprised Alex, though it gave her new information to puzzle over. Alex looked up and groaned.
Well, there it is.
Ahead of them, lit by work lights, was the Sentry XB-3. The Sentry Line was the first and last attempt by the Amans of the Pupus sector to enter into the shipwright business. Most personal ships have an average length of 10 meters and weigh about 6 or 10 metric tons, large enough for 3 or 4 adults to travel comfortably for several days. Some craft are smaller, like Alex's Warpette, being designed for only 2 people and a few days' travel. Of course, vessels can be a great deal larger, on up to the dreadnoughts, measuring more than 2 kilometers in length, with crews of hundreds and almost endless stays in space. The Sentry was a large, personal spaceship, measuring more than 15 meters in length and weighing more than 20 metric tons. It was designed to be a personal luxury vessel for 5 to 8 people for a few weeks' travel. The Amans put a great deal of effort into the size, styling, and creature comforts, but apparently did not put enough effort into the engine and safety features. Alex's comment about the number of XB-3s that were recalled or blown up was an exaggeration, but not by very much. A charger automaton, a combination of truck and robot, disconnected from the XB-3 as Zeal and Alex walked up to the ship. Zeal walked over to an engine hatch that showed some scorching from the recent fire. He rubbed at the soot and burn marks and frowned. But then he stepped back to take in the whole vessel and smiled.
I don't care what you say, she still looks mighty slick.
Alex leveled her eyes at him. No one can see you in a hyperhole. She climbed into the ship and began looking over the interior. Comfort isn't worth anything when the engine blows up, or the cabin pops a stress fracture and degasses in under a second. She walked to the front of the ship, right up to the main console, put down the briefcase, and began checking out the instruments. Zeal caressed the faux leather seats.
Party pooper. Evan said she modified the thing. I know Evan. With her mods, it's probably the best an XB-3 can be.
Alex sat in the pilot's chair. That's what bothers me. Don't get me wrong. I trust that filthy friend of yours, and I agree with all the modifications she made. But there are some things that just can't be undone. The problem with this bucket comes from the design console, not the parts or the manufacturer. But I think you're right. She seems like a damn good tech, so let's go. Alex began gesturing at the console. She ran a complete systems check, secured the hatches, checked the provisions, and then double-checked every pre-flight parameter. She intended to have all her flight skills at her command on this trip to make sure it would not be her last. Once she felt at ease with the working order of the XB-3, she headed to the comfort station. It's probably psychological, but I have just got to wash up a bit and clean my teeth. She shuddered and retched. Zeal lounged in one of the forward chairs as he looked over the lavish interior of the craft. His lack of knowledge of engine design and flight capabilities led him to see the ship in a different light. He saw its size and amenities. He smiled and relaxed. He was going to be traveling in style with a nice, intelligent woman. There was a mystery to solve, with the opportunity to collect a large sum of credits, and just enough heat behind him to give the whole affair a delightful edge. He reflected on all this and realized that it wasn't just the ship or the challenge. It was Alexandria. He was falling for her. The thought scared him, and he pushed it back. If it happens, it happens, he thought. But let's not encourage it. Not now, anyway. Alex returned to the pilot's chair, obviously feeling more at ease with herself. She gestured at the console again, and then called the tower and requested the proper taxi lane for liftoff. Most spacecraft do not require a runway in the same sense as a winged aircraft, but they do require some horizontal distance to build up necessary momentum. The larger the craft, the longer the horizontal clearance required, and the Sentry, being fairly large by personal craft standards, was going to require a decent stretch of land.
Century XB-3, this is Percy's Pleasure Planet Moon's landing flight control. We do not have you on our monitor.
Moon's Landing Flight Control. I am piloting for Mr. Zeal Katz. You know these sentries. The visual circuitry is out. We will observe instrument and audio flight regulations.
Very well, XB3 Zeal Katz. We have you on scanners. You are now marked as an instruments-only flight. Your flight plan is on file, and you are cleared to enter the taxi lanes. Please proceed to lane N5. We will send you a green light when you are cleared for liftoff. Takeoff will be at your control, though please note, per Percy's Pleasure Planet regulations, all inbound and outgoing flights require remote operation from Central Flight Control. Once you are airborne, navigation will be handled by the tower.
Thank you, Flight Control. Alexandria taxied toward the indicated launch path, moving the large vessel carefully around parked vessels and other taxiing craft. She poked the intercom to mute. I kept the vid off because I did not want to have any visual record of me. Of course, now I have got to follow all instrument flight regs. She paused and looked at Zeal. Why am I telling you this? You don't have a single idea about flight regulations. She turned back to the instrument panel with impugnation as she stopped the ship at the head of the appropriate launch path. Zeal felt the jab.
Smart move. And true, I don't know how to fly, but that doesn't mean you can't explain it to me. I do want to learn.
Alex kept her attention on the console and prepared to follow Flight Control's instructions to the letter, not wanting to raise suspicion. As she watched her instruments, she thought. During the years she was on Kat's case, the fleet continually puzzled over their inability to get a make on any ship belonging to him. He had been spotted in spaceports, but as Alexandria reflected on it, she recalled that he was usually seen around public or group transportation terminals. The fleet knew he used public transportation a lot, but they thought he must have used a private vessel from time to time. Finally, after all those years, Alex knew the truth. She was now keenly aware of how well Zeal could move in and around business and bureaucracy. She had seen in his house and with the Skyhopper that he could disguise credits, even his name. There had never been a personal craft for the fleet to get a make on. Zeal probably knew it was too easy a mark and had always used his skills to sneak aboard public transportation or charter flights. It would be easier than crashing through a planetary net with AODTs announcing every move. Alex received the green light from the tower, started the run, and lifted off. The XB-3 was bigger than her warpette. It handled awkwardly. At 100 meters above the ground, Flight Control took over, but she kept a sharp eye on all the instruments. She didn't trust the ship and wanted to be ready to jump in if anything looked flaky. Just prior to reaching Orbit 1, 3P Flight Control sounded over the intercom again.
XB3 Zeal Katz, your flight plan has you listed as a direct flight beyond Orbit 10. Is that still your intention?
3P Flight Control, this is XB3 Zeal Katz. We confirm the flight plan. We will not, repeat, not be making any stops or changes through Orbit 10.
Very well. We hope you enjoyed Percy's Pleasure Planet, where the fun never ends, and we hope you will return again soon. Your Orbit 3 exit window should be coming up on your console now. Once you have exited Orbit 3, navigation control will be returned to you. Please observe all clearances as you are under instrument flight regulations. Percy's Pleasure Planet Flight Control, out.
Orbit 3 exit window confirmed. Thank you, Flight Control. Alex switched off the intercom. That's the last of them, I hope. The ship moved through orbit lanes 1 to 3 smoothly and automatically followed the Orbit 3 exit window. Once leaving Orbit 3, a remote navigation indicator on the console went dark and a small chime sounded. Alex said, "It's in my hands now." She followed regulations as she guided the vessel through all the outer orbit lanes. After what seemed like a short hour, they were in an expanding orbit, leaving Percy's Pleasure Planet behind them and heading toward the 3P boundary net.